Listen very carefully. I shall say this only once. I think that the only pretty much good thing to come out of any wars is LOLO. It's given us a lot of good shows, and that's pretty much the only positive thing I can really think to say about most wars, really, because I think a lot of them are bankers' wars, and they're really about more power and money and empires more than what they tell us it's about. So, yeah, I'll take this off now because I'm going to go a bit serious, so better take it off. Don't want to seem rude because it was a song that came to my attention the other day by Radiohead called Harry Patch. And Harry Patch was an amazing man who was actually in the trenches. So he was in the First World War. I've always felt like a bit more drawn to the First World War. I don't know why. I feel like maybe I might have been in the trenches in a past life. I don't know, when I was young, I remember having a few dreams about it. I don't know if that's because we were learning about it at school, or maybe, you know, it was from a past life. I don't know, but I digress. Anyway, Harry Patch actually lived to be 111 years old. So that's a bit weird, given how much he's been involved with all the memorial days and everything. So it is quite weird, the 11/11 thing, how it's like even his death, you know, he died at 111 years old, which is an amazing age for anyone. But I think specifically for him, it kind of ties in with, you know, his message. And his message was very much anti-war, not surprisingly, because of, you know, a lot of the things that he'd seen. And I think that's quite common, actually, is that, you know, most soldiers, whether they go into it because they have to or because they choose to, they usually end up much more anti-war at the end of it than they were at the beginning. So I think that says quite a lot. And apparently they're really struggling to subscribe, you know, new soldiers in the UK and probably in a lot of other countries as well, I'd imagine. And I think they're down like 30%, you know, compared to the previous years. So it just goes to show that a lot of people are, you know, not seeing it as this wonderful, brave thing anymore, and maybe really starting to understand what it's all really about, and not wanting to, you know, risk their lives. Because it said, you know, why are people, I googled it, why are people not subscribing or joining up, you know, for the army? And it said things like, you know, the fear of death and post traumatic stress disorder and the awareness of that. And it's like, well, yeah, people just aren't, you know, not as stupid, really, not as naive to it, you know. There's much more awareness. So even those that do survive war, they're usually mentally a complete mess, and a lot of them will actually commit suicide anyway, you know. So, or just spend a lot of time in therapy, or just not being able to really have any kind of life. So just wanted to remember that, because obviously it's all about remembering, but what are remembering? So, you know, what he said was his funeral as well. He had he's requested no guns at his funeral, and he wanted German soldiers on one side carrying him and British soldiers on the other. So to show it's like, you know, the peace, which we do now have, at least with Germany, don't we? If not with other countries. And he said, irrespective of the uniforms, we were all victims. Politicians who took us to war should have been given the guns and told to settle their differences, instead of organising nothing better than legalised mass murder. Because that's really what often war ends up being, and specifically World War One. You know, it was just a massacre, and they just didn't stand a chance. And a lot of these were really, really young lads. And he said it really haunted him. The last words of one soldier when he was walking through, and he said, you know, please shoot me, because he knew he was going to die. That was one thing he said. But then he didn't get to shoot him, because then he just said mother, and then he died. And that just shows that, it was just, it wasn't really a man. It was still a child. 18 is just so young still. And I think it's absolutely ridiculous that you can actually join the army in this country, and probably a lot of others, at 16. I mean, 16, you don't know anything, and I think that's exactly why they want people at that age, because they want them when they don't know anything, because most people, once they get older and wiser, probably wouldn't be willing to sign up and be willing to do what they're told in the same way. So yeah, I think that's absolutely something that must change. And I can't believe that, you can't vote at 16. You can have, you can't drink alcohol, you can just about have sex maybe, but most people probably aren't still. So they're just so young to be making these big decisions, and I can't actually believe that's still going on. And another thing I wanted to mention was the film Good Will Hunting. I absolutely love this film. And I think if another war was going to be fought, it would be very much, I mean, it already is more about drones, more about robotics and all of that side of things. So there probably wouldn't be that much kind of, I mean, there still is a lot of stuff, I suppose, on the battlefield, but um, in Good Will Hunting, they want to get him to sign up for the National Security Agency, and there's just a brilliant clip where, they're like, why wouldn't you want to work for us? And he's like, let me think a minute, why wouldn't I want to work for the NSA? And then he goes into this whole spiel about, let's say that, I've got to break some codes, and I managed to break these codes, and it turns out those codes mean you've got the location to where somebody is, and then you bomb a whole village, and like 1,000 people die, 1,000 innocent people, mainly women and children. And it doesn't really matter, men as well, they're still innocent, aren't they? Just because maybe there's one person there that they're trying to get, why should 1,000 people die? And then that's going to lead to revenge, more killing, and just this huge massacre of people. And all for what? Because he cracked the code, and that's what he's contributed. And then he goes on about all these other things, the butterfly effect that could have, and all the disasters that could come of just one little thing that he's done. And that's wisdom, isn't it? That's, some people are very intelligent, but not often do they have the wisdom to go with it. And I think that's what the film really shows so well, that he's got both. He does have a lot of issues emotionally, but he is incredibly smart, and he can see through a lot of the government systems and the ego, I suppose, because a lot of people, they would like to show off that how clever they are, and that may be, or money, because they get dangled a lot of money in front of them, that becomes the kind of incentive. But if you're truly wise, you'll see that there's some things that are way more important. And how can you actually enjoy wealth if you know you're responsible for thousands of deaths? Tony Blair, are you there?